This book is like magic mushrooms in literary form. And I don't think I enjoyed the trip very much, but it is approved by Gillian Anderson. She's a fruit. I have a lot to say about this book. You are gonna want to get comfortable. Strap in. I can just feel the comments. I can just feel the comments that are gonna come from this review. Prayer for the comments section. Oh no. Oh yes. Hi guys, welcome to a video, and in today's video I'm just going to be reviewing the book Big Swiss. A lot of you will already be familiar with this book because of course Jodie Comer is going to be starring in the upcoming on-screen adaptation of it. And as soon as I heard she was going to be playing a sapphic role, I immediately had to get my hands on this book to see just how sapphic that role was going to be. It's called Lesbian Research. Big Swiss is about a sex therapist transcriptionist who falls in love with a client whilst listening to her sessions. When they accidentally meet in real life, an explosive love affair ensues. So I'm just gonna jump straight into it. This book is fantastical and ridiculous in both a good and a bad way. It's a very crude piece of work. It's certainly not for anybody who is prudish or who prefers a more serious approach to heavier themes. This book is very vibrant, and I would say the best thing about it by far is that it's full to the brim of unique and outlandish characters. There is not one dull character in this book. And I love its raw and unapologetic portrayal of women. It's refreshing to see such messy, awful, crude, and unhinged female characters. I mean, even if you have to take the narrative with a pinch of salt, it's very fast paced, and I can't ever say that I was bored by what was happening at any point. The book also delves into the concept of trauma and how it impacts a person's relationship with themselves and their relationships with other people, how it can impact somebody's life, their behaviour, and so on. But it does this in such a light-hearted way that it's easy to digest. The book has a real streak of honesty running right throughout it. It does verge on uncomfortable sometimes. I saw somebody describe this book as roadkill. They said it was so grotesque but they couldn't look away, and I'd say that's about right, to be honest. There's also a lot of feminist commentary in the book surrounding society's general ignorance towards female bodies and female sexuality. And while some of the commentary is a little bit on the nose and awkwardly inserted, at times I understood what the author was trying to do, and, you know, I appreciate that. I do. Now, on to where this review gets slightly more spicy. It's a spicy. This book is very sexually explicit, but it's not arousing in the slightest. The love scenes between Greta and Flavia were at best clinical and devoid of real connection, and at worst written like bad fan fiction by a preteen. I am not exaggerating when I say this book contains the worst sex scenes between two women that I've ever read. And I've read a lot of literature. And the thing is, all of this may be forgivable if this entire novel didn't revolve around this supposedly electric love affair between two women who apparently couldn't get enough of each other. That just did not translate through their interactions at all. Her pussy looked like advanced origami is one of the worst sentences I've ever read. It's so bad. Oh my god. The way that the author describes sex between two women, the way that she describes female bodies, physically enraged me. For example, the first time they sleep together, Greta grabs her phone and tries to take a picture of Flavia naked without her consent. It's so bizarre. It's so bizarre. Oh my god. I'm not sure if the point was to try and shock the reader, if it was to try and disgust the reader, or if it was an attempt at comedy. I couldn't tell. It's some of the worst writing I've ever read. It's really bad. It's really bad. The worst thing about this book, undoubtedly, is the relationship between Greta and Flavia. The whole relationship was completely unrealistic and devoid of any real emotion or connection. You could maybe attribute the lack of depth in this novel to its overall light-hearted tone, or you could attribute it to the fact that the characters themselves are not capable of real connection because of their trauma. You could do that, but as I said, the author writes these two women in such a way that the reader is supposed to believe that they're crazy about each other, and yet, like I said, it just doesn't translate in any of their interactions. For the most part, the relationship between the two women is antagonistic. There's no real warmth or love there, and it seems a bit ridiculous that they're even drawn to one another in the first place. You know, Flavia is this icy, intelligent, no-nonsense type, and Greta talks like a 5-year-old. I just had a really hard time believing that these two women would ever really be together. It's very much like the author forced two characters who didn't belong together. It really is reminiscent of bad fan fiction. The other thing is, if the whole point of their relationship was to grow through their individual traumas and help one another, you know, potentially find some healing through one another, I could at least understand the relationship from that point of view, but that's not what happens. At most, one just lectures the other about how said trauma has impacted their lives and how they're a dysfunctional person because of it. It's really actually kind of awful. What I will say about the book is I don't think the way that Greta deals with her sexuality is in any way, shape or form unrealistic. I think Greta is very much an honest reflection of a lot of women who settle into the comfort and security of heterosexual relationships even when they don't really have any real desire for men. A lot of women do become apathetic about their desires, about their sexuality, and again, I thought Greta was a very honest reflection of that. But one thing I found incredibly odd about this book is that nobody mentions bisexuality until towards the end of it. Throughout most of the book, people seem to either be categorized as straight or gay. I don't even think the word bisexual is mentioned until right near the very end, which again was just odd. It's like the concept of bisexuality didn't even really exist, even though both Greta and Flavia were quite clearly bisexual. There's a really weird line from Flavia where she says, "I can't see myself identifying as a lesbian," even though nobody's asking her to identify as a lesbian. I don't know, that kind of writing just comes across to me as a little bit basic, a little bit reductive. Honestly, a lot of the dialogue in this book either made me physically cringe or shout out loud about how bad it was. Whilst the book has a very comedic tone, I really didn't find it funny at all. I do understand that humour is subjective. I think if you have a very crude sense of humour, you're definitely going to lap this book up. For me, it just relied too much on toilet humour, on laughing at body parts, on laughing at sex, which again, some people do find that stuff hilarious. I just don't, and therefore I found the book very juvenile as opposed to funny. Juvenile is also a good word to describe the sexual interactions in this book. It is. The weird thing is, some parts of this book are actually well written. So I know the author has potential, but then other parts of it are just absolutely horrendous. In terms of writing, I don't understand it. It's so bizarre. But then again, that totally fits the vibes of this book. It does. As for the ending of the book, I didn't hate it. I just wasn't exactly sure what I was supposed to feel. I really wasn't moved by this book in the slightest, which is interesting considering the book contains a lot of things which should move a person. The book really lacked connection and it lacked depth, and I think that's why I came away from it not feeling anything. Oh my gosh. Overall, Big Swiss is a bold and audacious piece of work, which absolutely straddles the line between quirky and idiotic, and people will either certainly adore or detest this book. To me, this book is very similar to The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, in that the narrative and the characters in this book have so much potential, but it just doesn't have the intelligent writing to back it up. What I will say is this is absolutely fantastic material for an on-screen adaptation. If they rework the areas which held this book back, they could create something incredibly entertaining and add in the much needed depth that was missing from this book. Also, I would watch Jodie Comer eat a piece of toast. Okay guys, if you've read Big Swiss, let me know what you think of it down in the comments section below. It might get spicy. If you want to support lesbian content and women's voices, come on down to the Sapphic Underground Club. It's just a monthly tip for the content that I put out. It's like putting coins into a jukebox of very questionable songs. Sold. Don't forget to subscribe for instant disappointment, and I'll see you guys soon. Bye.